Good afternoon. I'm Karen Finney, in for Martin Bashir. We start today with a look at the Stand Your Ground laws that played a role in the murder of Trayvon Martin. In the last 24 hours, the law has become a topic for both Republicans and Democrats, and the president weighed in very personally earlier today.
I think all of us have to do some soul searching to figure out how does something like this happen. And that means that we examine the laws and the context for what happened, as well as the specifics of the incident. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
Trayvon was an unarmed young man brutally gunned down, but he now lives as a symbol of the true impact of the Stand Your Ground laws, which allow any person, anywhere, who believes himself or herself threatened to use deadly force, even if they know they're not in imminent danger. The Tampa Bay Times estimates that Trayvon is one of at least 130 people who've been attacked under Stand Your Ground. Most of those have ended in death, and only a handful of cases ever made it to court. So who are and where are the other Trayvons? We don't know their names, but you're likely to find them not only in Florida, but also in any of the other 30 states with similar laws. As the investigation of Trayvon's murder has unfolded over the last several days, numerous flaws have been found in the law. So maybe the question then is, it wasn't a question of when a tragedy like this would make us pay attention to these laws, but who would make us pay attention to these laws. When the law passed in Florida in 2005, it was just the beginning.
It's common sense to allow people to defend themselves, and to have to, when you're in a position where you're being threatened, and there's a life-threatening situation, to have to retreat and put yourself in a very precarious position, you know, defies common sense.
That was then Governor Jeb Bush of Florida. He and his fellow Republicans were ecstatic when the law passed. And as typical, they use fear and rhetoric about personal freedom without balancing Second Amendment rights with the safety of our communities. One Florida state attorney who opposed the law even said that they decided to fix something that wasn't broken. So how do we go from one state to 30? Who was the typhoid Mary for this horrible outbreak? Try not to be surprised. It's the usual suspects: the Koch brothers, the NRA, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and Clinton vets. Remember the Scafee family? Oh yeah. These are the same people who stymied gun regulation at every point, who funded and ghostwrite these laws and others that have become a core of the conservative agenda that's being implemented across our country. It's the same group that also wrote the voter ID laws, which now threaten to disenfranchise some 5 million American voters, many of them African American. It's the same cast of characters, and it's the same story. So we're going to get now to our panel. In Sanford, we're joined by Joyanne Reed, managing editor of thegrio.com and an MSNBC contributor. In Washington, we're joined by Democratic strategist Julian Epstein. And here with me in New York, Michael Eric Dyson, a professor at Georgetown University and MSNBC political analyst. Good day to all of you, and thanks for being with me. Joyanne, I want to start.
Great to be here.
I want to start with you. You know, you've been there on the ground. There was that incredible gathering last night. How are things shifting? Has the mood shifted between last night and the announcement from Governor Scott that he's going to put together a task force to look at these laws?
Well, I don't know that Governor Scott's winning any converts down here with that. I think that the mood was really frustration before Police Chief Bill Lee announced he was stepping aside, to a real sense of momentum. People don't necessarily feel that Lee stepping aside temporarily is closure, but I think they feel they're winning, and they're now going to keep pushing. The message we got out of last night is that people down here, it was very peaceful. People are very unified. They're gratified by the support and the international attention, and now they want more. They want Zimmerman arrested, George Zimmerman arrested, and they want Police Chief Lee to step down permanently.
It's a little surprising every time I think of the fact that George Zimmerman is actually still out there with his gun, and we don't actually even know where. So here's, Joyanne, just one other question for you. The silence from GOP wunderkind Marco Rubio is kind of stunning. He just can't even, it seems like he can't bring himself to say that these are bad laws or to weigh in. Is anybody talking about that down there?
Well, not only him, but think about Allen West, who is one of only 2 African-American Republicans in the Congress right now. And his district in Palm Beach is not that far from here, maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours south of here. We haven't really heard him weigh in. I mean, just the Republican Party in general seems to have been silent. This state has an African-American lieutenant governor. She so far has not made a statement. Governor Scott has only now waded into it. But yeah, Marco Rubio, who is being really sort of made the GOP star throughout the country and looked at as a potential vice presidential candidate, he hasn't said anything, but he's positioned very strangely. He wants to be the sort of mainstream national figure, but he's also positioned as this Tea Party friendly conservative Republican. And there seems to be a reticence for Republicans to speak about this.
It really seems shocking to me that they feel like this is not even something they can comment on. I did note, though, that actually Allen West did make some comments. He did call the shooting, a tragedy, but he also commented that he wasn't going to head down to Florida and, sort of be a part of the circus. I don't know that the circus was his exact words. That may be mine, but that was the tone of it. Michael, I want to come to you. Maybe they just shouldn't say anything. That's at least what Geraldo Rivera said this morning on Fox and Friends. Let's take a listen.
I am urging the parents of Black and Latino youngsters particularly to not let their children go out wearing hoodies. I think the hoodie is as much responsible for Trayvon Martin's death as George Zimmerman was.
So my read is it wasn't the gun. It wasn't George. It was the hoodie. It was Trayvon's fashion choice that is to blame.
Sartorial selection has led to selective execution. I mean, how ludicrous is that? I mean, look, I've been on Geraldo's show in the past. I've enjoyed engaging him, but that is the most ludicrous argument to justify the cold-blooded, to me, murder of a young man without any ability to have him arrested, that is Mr. Zimmerman, to have just due process in the courts, and for this man to stand trial for the murder of a young man. This man had Skittles in his hand, a hoodie. Millions of white people wear hoodies every day.
And it was raining.
It was raining. He was covering himself. And they make hoodies not for people who are gang members. They make hoodies for most Americans who want to cover themselves up. So to suggest that this hoodie was the source of this is to ignore willfully the racial dynamics that involve themselves when we talk about who's wearing a hoodie. When a young black man is wearing a hoodie, that's a problem. When a white guy is wearing a hoodie, it's not noticed.
Julian, I want to bring you in here.
If I could just...
Yeah, go ahead, Joanne.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interject, but I think it's also important to note that when the 911 call was made by George Zimmerman, he didn't say, I see a guy in a hoodie, he looks suspicious. He just, he noted that he saw someone there, and he didn't point that out. And in his previous 46 calls, it didn't seem to be a hoodie that triggered his response that there was something wrong. But in 6 of those calls that have been released, he did seem to find a black guy walking through his neighborhood alarming.
I mean, it was obviously an
Racial.
Incredibly ridiculous comment.
They weren't all in hoodies, I'm assuming.
Julian, I want to bring you in here. We shift gears a little bit because, we're learning more and more about the involvement of ALEC, the NRA, the Koch brothers in crafting these laws, or sort of crafting draft versions of these laws that we're now seeing pass through Republican-controlled state legislatures and Republican governors. Were you surprised to hear that those groups were involved?
No, I had very personal experience with it in 1999 and 2000 after the Columbine shootings, when the same group wanted to fight basic background checks for people buying guns at gun shows. And look, these are terrible laws, as was pointed out. They encourage shootouts. They encourage conflict when conflict avoidance makes sense. But I think as bad as these laws are, I still think you're likely to see Zimmerman arrested, because even under the Florida statute, it requires that Zimmerman would have had to have been attacked and that he would have had to have been facing grave danger. Now, we know from the facts, even though some of the facts are sketchy, we know pretty convincingly that Zimmerman was the pursuer in this case. He was told by the police to stop pursuing. He continued to pursue. The plausibility of Zimmerman facing grave bodily harm is very, very, I think, implausible even under this statute. So I think the likelihood is that you will see an arrest in coming weeks. I think, secondly, you will see a very strong possibility of the federal government getting more involved, because under 241, 241 of Title 18. If there's racial animus, you give cause to a federal civil rights case.
241 of Title 18 for those of us who don't know.
241 of Title 18, but it's the federal civil rights criminal statute, and it allows for the federal government to get involved, particularly if state and governments fail to properly prosecute a criminal case. And I think there was evidence, at least in the tapes, that there was some considerable racial animus. And I think as far as Robert Lee resigning or temporarily resigning, which I don't understand the temporary part, I think that's the beginning of the problems for this police department, because as you know, they've had problems in the past, but under the sister statute to 241, 242 allows for the federal government to investigate whether the local police department had some racial animus. The fact of the matter that the police department not only failed to arrest Zimmerman when all of the evidence shows right now that he should at a minimum be released. He can make the stand your ground defense in a court of law, but all the evidence shows that he should be arrested, rather, for murder. But the fact that the police also administered a blood test only to Trayvon Martin and not to Zimmerman really betrays, I think, a very, very questionable bias on the part of the police department. So I think it's not only Lee resigning, but I think the possibility of an investigation as well.
I'm going to stop you there because I want to come back to Dr. Dyson for a minute. I mean, this idea that Zimmerman, and then Joanne, I want to get to you very quickly with this, is still out there. I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, but we don't know what his mental state is.
Right.
We know he's got a gun.
Right.
We know he may be seeing all this attention coming his way.
For his own safety. Let's just say, let's go to the ultimate extreme. For your safety, Mr. Zimmerman, because people may want to execute vigilante justice against you. We want to protect you. We want to put you in jail. We want to put you under cover of the law. Nothing is reasonable here to suggest that Mr. Zimmerman should continue to go free. We don't know exactly where he is. He's out there with a gun. We don't know how much he's inclined to be self-destructive or to ultimately assault somebody else. It seems to me just common sense to be able to lock him up.
There's another way of looking at that as well.
Hold on, Joanne. Joanne, just quickly, because we're running out of time, I want to end with you. Is anybody asking that question at these press conferences? Because so far I have not really seen that. I mean, we've talked about the police chief, we've talked about Trayvon, which is all very important, but I have not heard a lot about the actual question of where is this man?
Well, believe me, that's the question that's on the minds of everyone down here. Every reporter, people you talk to on the street, everyone is saying, where is George Zimmerman? Believe me, that is the question on the minds of people. But look, what the police would tell you, and they're not really talking, it's hard to get them to give a press conference, is that they can't hold him because they didn't charge him with a crime. So he's a free man because he isn't charged with anything. So, you know, the fact of where he is, technically he's free to go wherever he wants, and he has a legal gun permit. So, yes, everyone down here is asking that question. Where is George Zimmerman?
Joanne Reed, Julian Epstein, and Michael Eric Dyson, thank you very much for being with me.
Thank you.